The lights.
Hello.
The lights.
Welcome back to Open Book. My name is Pumla Dineo Gqola. I am delighted to be in conversation with these three fabulous people on stage and with you. I'm going to ask you to please give a really, really, really warm welcome to Foluso Agbaje, who's at her inaugural. It's the first time she's at Open Book.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we want her to come back. And she's given us such a fantastic debut. We definitely want her to come back for this wonderful book that we'll be talking about, and whatever else she has in her, because I'm sure if you haven't read the book yet, which I'm sure you will immediately, starting this evening when you finish Open Book, you will agree with me that we want her to come back and we want her to keep writing. So welcome, Foluso. Foluso, welcome.
Thank you.
Next to her is Nathi, who is not new to Open Book. Nathi Ngubane. We'll be talking about Nathi's fantastic, I'm not going to spoil it, we'll talk about it in a minute, so welcome Nathi back. And next to Nathi Ngubane is the magical Lesedi Molefi, whom I am absolutely vibrating with joy to be talking to, whose wonderful debut. I think there's a second book in the coming.
Oh.
But I'm a little obsessed. I'm obsessed with his debut, so I'm very happy. So I feel like the session is really such a treat. Hopefully it'll be a treat for all of us. Certainly is a treat for me to be in conversation with these three particular writers about these absolutely phenomenal books that I've read and reread, and I'm sure I will be rereading with delight and hopefully teaching from and driving people crazy about for many years to come. So the session is called, you can read their bios, right? So I'm not going to do their bios. We're going to jump right into it. The session is called Stories of Rebellion. Three very different types of treatments of the meeting places of aesthetics, sensibility, and self-making. In the midst of huge processes of violent hierarchies. I am unapologetically going to be talking about the making of the books. And I know that all three of them come to us with kind of treatments of very big processes. But I think we are at a book festival, so this is one of those times we can be completely unapologetic in talking about the craft and what the craft and the particular decisions about creativity that these writers allow us to experience the worlds that they create. So I want to start then. I keep saying I want to start. Okay, this is the last start, I promise. I'm going to offer an observation about what is shared across the three. I'm going to offer it to the three of them, and then I will move on to asking very specific questions about each of their books, and then obviously I will leave time for you to also be in conversation with them. I'm going to ask that I know we're South Africans and we like to give speeches and pretend that they are questions. I'm going to ask that we try to ask questions in there so that we can have as many people be in conversation with the three wonderful texts as possible. So when I thought about these three texts together and what they share, I thought of three words: transporting, the battle with love, which isn't a word but it's a phrase. The battle with love, each one in a different way is a battle with love, and the battle is not just a fight; it's kind of a dance as well. And then I thought each one as a project of world making, not simply responding to the world, which is often what we think about when we think about rebellion. So in Foluso's book, part of the world making, part of the invitation of the love and battle and dance with love is the invitation to think about World War II not as wholly defining. Right? Very often when we think about World War II films or novels, it's the war itself that is the main character. And Foluso makes very, I can't believe I told everybody it's Foluso, and now I'm on stage, I'm saying Foluso. You make different decisions around urban Africans and what it means to live through that period and what it means about how they think about the world. Nathi, when we say Palestine, as the people we are, but also at this particular moment, we think about what it means to imagine Palestine and to think about Palestine and to relate to Palestine in very specific ways. You make very different choices around that. And Nathi and Lesedi, we're living in a time where that is constantly described as a time with a mental health crisis. And so when we think about a memoir that is set in a psychiatric hospital, we may anticipate certain kinds of engagements and a certain kind of heaviness and difficulty. And yet you make very different choices. So I want you to talk to me about how each of these is, I'm saying, and you can disagree, of course, transporting a battle with love and world making rather than the heaviness that in abstract it seems that those settings conjure. And I'm going to start with Nathi.
All right. Shall I start?
Mm-hmm. Please.
All right.
No, I mean, respond to what I'm saying. Like, does that feel, what does that feel? I didn't mean start reading.
Oh, okay.
I've completely confused Nathi. Sorry, Nathi.
Okay. So, all right. So, when I think of stories of rebellion, the first thing that comes to mind to me is writing for a cause, education, and empathy. And as we all know, currently in the world, there's a genocide happening in Palestine. And Palestinians have been subjected to horrific treatment for more than 76 years. And so I'm part of a media collective called Social Bandit Media. And what we normally do is we create learning material for kids to make sense of the world that they live in. And we try, it's almost like an intervention, so to speak. And we always make sure that these materials are cost effective. And, you know, it really breaks my heart with what is currently happening with children in Palestine. And are we really going to deny Palestinian children the right to live, to exist, to be children, to dream? So really, that's where my passion really comes from with the work that I've done. And it all started last year with this coloring book that got me in quite a lot of trouble.
Yes.
Quite a lot of trouble with Zionists, South African Zionists. And really, like, we cannot deny that there's a genocide happening. So, really, to speak about the inspiration as well, the inspiration really started with the Jewish Board of Deputies. Oh, thank you, Jewish Board of Deputies, by the way, because when you picked up this coloring book and you called it a book that is calling for the genocide of Jewish people, for the annihilation of the Jewish state, that really gave us traction. And before that backlash, we had sold 2,000 copies. And after the backlash, we sold 10,000 more copies. So thank you, Jewish Board of Deputies. But since it all started with this book, I couldn't stop right there. I had to continue. Now we have Malcolm X in Gaza, to continue the story of Palestine. And this year really marks 100 years since Malcolm X, the revolutionary, the thinker, the leader, was born. And not many of us know that he went to Gaza in the 1960s. So I really wanted to shine light on that by really continuing the story of Palestine through Malcolm X's eyes. So I'm so excited to talk more about it today.
Fantastic. So Nathi, you and I had a conversation. I mean, I moderated his a panel that he was on last year as well. They obviously connected projects, but they're also very different projects, right? From the river to the sea is really about trying to tell the story of Palestine and the second one seems to me, Malcolm X in Gaza, seems to me as much a story about Malcolm X as a story about a very particular Palestine. Can you say a little bit about the transition or the difference in making the two books that are ostensibly about the same thing, sort of, but actually you come at them artistically in such, well, I don't know if you come at them in such different ways, but they certainly read like they very different invitations to think about Palestine and Malcolm X in the latter.
Yeah, well, you know, since I've mentioned that it's been 100 years since Malcolm X was born, and this really was a way to continue the story of Palestine and really continue the conversation. And because the thing is, when there's a genocide happening, we must never stop talking about it, because unfortunately for the Palestinians, the world has forgotten about Palestine. We really need better leaders to really hold Israel, or let me actually say it as it is, apartheid Israel, to task. So with Malcolm X, first of all, Malcolm was a brilliant man. He was very detailed in his writings. And with Malcolm X, really, we wanted to first celebrate him, but also try and bring to life what he could have seen when he visited Gaza in the Middle East in the 1960s. And Malcolm was also a photographer as well, so he was very visual. And unfortunately, while I was doing the research for Malcolm X, because this kind of work really requires careful research, and I'm really fortunate that I do have a team that helps with the research and everything else to put these kind of important learning materials together for kids. So the biggest challenge really this time around, because this Malcolm X in Gaza was much more difficult to put together than From the River to the Sea. And we really had to envision what Malcolm could have seen. So one of my favorite pages that I really spent so much time on was when Malcolm visited the Khan Yunis refugee camp. And obviously there was no images related to what Malcolm could have seen. So I had to use my artistic ability to try and capture how he would have interacted with the kid there, how he saw the conditions that Palestinians were living in, like inhumane conditions where no human being should be living like that. And so I had to revise the image 5 times because I had to scratch, I don't know how many times I scratched my head. I'm just lucky that I don't have a bald spot on my, I am so lucky. But that image really took a lot of time to revise, and I had to get it right, and I had to consult with a lot of people. I had to check with a lot of people, and I'm fortunate that I was given the right advice as well. And I also had to envision what Malcolm could have seen in the market, the time he spent with the Palestinian poets and politicians, and all of that. Really, the main point was I wanted kids to have access to Malcolm's legacy, and also I wanted kids to know the importance of international solidarity. Yes, we have issues in our countries. We come from apartheid ourselves, but it doesn't mean that you should only focus on the issues of your country, but oppression is universal. So we need to give our power to every single country, to every single people that is currently being oppressed.
Thank you. Foluso, I want to move to you. And I'm going to ask what would have been my second question, because Nathi's kind of talked about dreaming. And I want to thank you, first of all, for that. I mean, for Ngubane and Daiwo, who are the twins in the novel, who you write them as a way, and it's primarily Ngubane, but kind of Daiwo is there even when you move him slightly out of the frame. He's always there, and so you bring us. Your novel is really about the world of World War II in the world, but seeing the world from Lagos as a vibrant, complicated urban landscape, but that's also colonized, and you bring it and you focalize it through these twins, Ngubane and Daiwo, who are eccentric and beautiful and interesting and teenagers. So they're slippery and they want what they want, and they're siblings and they're twins. So they're kind of madly in love with each other, but they also, like, in the way that people who have siblings know, are like, what's wrong with you? And they know where to press. And I'm going to ask you to share with us some of the thought that went behind you writing about World War II, not really, but first of all, inviting us to think about World War II from an African location, right? And also World War II as not the thing that defines the world. They have a world and they're living through a time, but also these twins that you write in such incredible love-soaked language. Why is that the choice, to write about that in kind of destruction and danger and violence from a position of love and African beauty and contestation and sophistication?
So I really wanted to write a story about the women in Nigeria in the 1940s, more before I wanted to write a story about Nigeria during the Second World War. Mm-hmm. I grew up in Nigeria, but I knew so much more about World War II in other countries like the UK and America and Germany, and I knew so little about what happened in Nigeria, being a British colony at the time. So I remember it was when I had a conversation with my grandparents in about 2018, and my grandma was talking about being on a ration queue in Nigeria. And I remember we're eating, and I stopped eating, and I said, Grandma, I don't understand, like, ration queue in Lagos, in this country. And she was like, yes, of course, it was a really difficult time. And it just made me think about how I knew so little about my own history in that time period, and how, it's almost like a form of rebellion for me, like wanting to tell a story that was so hidden in terms of the women's lives at that time, writing African women as complex characters that were not just, having pain inflicted on them, but also taking, their own agency, taking charge of their lives, making decisions that would empower them, making decisions that would lead to a fulfilled life for them. And then choosing to do so through Kehinde and Taiwo. I've always been obsessed with twins, so selfishly I knew my debut novel had to have twins in there as a focal point. But also, they both had such different desires at this time. Taiwo went off to fight for the war. And that's something else that I found out in my research. There were so many soldiers from Nigeria and all across Africa that went to fight for the Second World War, but we hardly hear their stories. And then there was also, the women who stayed behind, who we definitely don't hear their stories at all, what they went through in terms of grief, love, the family dynamics that they had to go through, what was going on with the colonial government in Lagos at that time and the fights that they had to go through to kind of, assert themselves and have economic agency. So I wanted to show, they're twins, so it's almost like two sides of the same coin, but having very different desires and a very different life trajectory across the novel.
And Kehinde is a writer.
She is.
And in many ways, and it's interesting because, they're children. They're 17 and then they turn 18 and then one of them grows up, but you have to read it.
No spoilers.
No spoilers. And it's very exciting what happens when they grow up. So no, I'm going to try very hard not to have any spoilers. And of course, you say they have very different desires. Kehinde is a writer. And Taiwo doesn't just go to fight in World War II. He's a pilot, right? And when we think about African soldiers in World War II, we think about them in very particular ways. Certainly don't think about little boys in Lagos who dream about being pilots, and this is the way in which they get to fulfill that dream of being pilots. And it seems to me that you're saying something about the imagination for us as we approach your novel as well. Writing specifically and flying are very particular kinds of ways of moving through the world and making the world.
So should I go ahead? So I think, it's very important to me that as part of being an author, I'm writing stories about Black people, about Africans, about Nigerians, that is contrary to what we've been fed our whole lives. I want to write stories where it's clear that African children can also have big dreams, right? It's not just they went from the hut to the stream, they fetched water. I don't want to write those kind of stories. I want to write stories that represent the truth and represent the future, which is we have our own dreams and we're not afraid to dream those dreams. And when I was doing the research, there was a story about four Nigerians, and I think there were 3 other Africans that went, almost exactly like Taiwo, they went to train for the Royal Air Force in England. And again, nobody talks about this. We hear about the pilots that, all the British pilots, the American pilots, the German pilots, the French pilots. We don't hear about the African pilots. And, it's so niche. It's not something you can wake up and decide I'm going to be a pilot. It's the kind of dream that you have from childhood. And I really wanted to show that as Nigerian people, even in 1940s, even before then, we've always had dreams and desires that cannot be dictated to us. There's almost a story that I feel like the West wants authors to write, which is the pain, the struggle. And I wanted to move away from that and show that there's just so much more in terms of the realm of possibilities available to us and that have always been available to us. Because we're smart people, we've got desires, we've got dreams, and we're living them out. Even being here, all of us is an act of rebellion in itself. So,
yeah.
Lesedi, thank you, Foluso.
thank you.
I'm going to ask them to read in a bit. Lesedi,
Hi.
so your day job, you spend a lot of time thinking about, because you're in a creative day job. Lesedi works in advertising. And so you're thinking about the form of the message all the time, but you're not just thinking about the creative expression itself, but you have to wrestle with the form constantly, and it's very short form. I know that very often patient 12A is characterized as taking on a diary form. And maybe, but it struck me a diary or a kind of a cataloging of a certain period in psychiatric confinement. I'm going to propose something, and then I'm interested in how that lands with you.
Terrified.
Huh? You're terrified. Don't be. We're playing. We're having fun here. I read it this time on rereading. I read it slightly different something first time, but on this reading, I thought it read less like a diary and more as a kind of an emplotment of a process of making. Self-making, but making beyond that.
100%. I think certainly. Hey, everybody. I think certainly in the final third of the book, 100%. You know, where it's sort of. I mean, just in terms of a quick recap of what the book is about. So, you know, in 2016, I experienced burnout. So I took myself to a clinic, and what I found there was, you know, just I think just an insane cross section of ordinary South Africans. And in kind of working through my burnout, I had to kind of retrace my steps. The steps that I guess led me to the doors of the clinic, of me taking myself there. And in so doing, in sort of retracing my own steps, I guess what you also see is the country those steps were taking place, and the world around me, and all its contradictions, and all its hierarchies, and its limitations. And what was interesting to me is that sort of, you know, those limitations and those contradictions kind of replicate themselves even inside an institution of, you know, like an institution of healing, a building of healing, like a place where we're going to almost escape what's kind of, you know, killing people's souls, you know, and you enter into a space like that, and you're like, I need a timeout, and then the bullshit is like, hi, we're here too, you know, and so that, I guess, sort of the basis of the story. There was, I remember I remember when I first came across sort of the concept of self-talk, which I think, but you know, speaking to a diary, I think a large part of it is that, right? Like a big part of the conversation is sort of me, conversation with myself, and, you know, having conversations with other people at the clinic too, right? Who are also ordinary South Africans who are like, what the fuck, bro? And what the fuck was very important. I genuinely believe there's so much insight to be gained into how our bodies are responding negatively to our conditions. You know, how our bodies are refusing to accept what's happening around us as normal. And so there's then a conversation that I then had to have with myself about what I think of and accept as normal, because to a large extent, what we do, is especially children, when children grow up in very traumatic circumstances, in very traumatic situations, like I did, like many South African people do, we live in a lot of trauma. I genuinely believe we have huge levels of undiagnosed trauma in South African society. Is that you tend to internalize it. You tend to think there's something wrong with me for you know, responding negatively or acting out against these very traumatic circumstances. And so, to answer your question, I had to almost remake myself against those traumas and kind of what I grew up around, and you know, and realize also that survival mode is not who you are, it's who you have to be, right? And in order to survive a dystopian rainbow nation, you know, and so there's a process of shedding that in order to, I guess, bring up a new or try to create a new sense of self. It's also pretty insane because, you almost have to imagine yourself out of the world that does exist in order to start to create a self that, would kind of be able to coexist in the kind of world that you want to live in, where there is no genocide, right? Where the kind of world that makes you wonder, like the kind of world that questions you for believing children shouldn't be killed, is insane, and that is the world that we actually do live in, and so there's high levels of delusion. There's a lot of talking to yourself. There's sort of a lot of working through things. From your question earlier, does it get heavy? It does. The book is 400 pages long, so it is a bit of a workout on the arm. But I did try to find the more tender moments in that process of sort of shedding and remaking of self.
It's interesting because it doesn't, what you do, it isn't heavy. I mean, it's not escapist.
Right.
So it doesn't trivialize the realness of the breakdown, the realness of the violent society.
Right.
And yet you make a decision to write, and it's tricky because it's a memoir. I was going to say the persona.
Yeah.
Maybe
Avatar.
the persona, maybe you, I don't know. In such delicate prose, right? It's playful. It's kind of, and so this is part, I suppose this is part of why I'm not sure that it's a diary, right? So you're talking about in terms of self-talk, and there's certainly, I think there is that. But there's also this very slippery, delightful, in crisis person sometimes,
right,
but who's slippery and eccentric and like is in a very difficult, is meditating on a range of really complicated and sometimes difficult contexts, but who seems completely impossible to manipulate in a context where there's like, this is what you should do, and maybe this is how but it's, kind of there isn't a question there, but
right. No, sometimes madness is nice, guys. Like it's very nice there because it's like first of all, everyone's given up on you, like you don't owe anybody anything, right? You're just like, and I think that's one of the beautiful things. Maybe not so beautiful for people that didn't take themselves to the clinic, right? Like in my case, I admitted myself, so it was an active decision. I was just like, hey, it'll also get me out of work for 21 days. I was like, this is great, right? And it was like around November, December, so I was like, I'm going to see you guys in February. So it was perfect, and so maybe for the people who didn't admit themselves, maybe it's a little bit different. But I think for those who do, there's something incredibly liberating and freeing about just kind of going, "Fuck, I'm done. Like I'm exhausted. I'm finished, and you know what? I'm just gonna chain smoke all day with these guys that I just met, and I wouldn't otherwise meet them because he lives in Benoni." And I've never been to Benoni, but here's this guy from Benoni, and we're gonna have a conversation in the courtyard now while chain smoking cigarettes. And it was those, I guess also those little sort of rituals that I found interesting, and there's lots to be said, I think, also just about sort of community in the process of healing. A lot of people who sort of undergo sort of such processes talk more about how they find healing in each other more than they do in sort of like the therapists. And that's great because it's free, right? The therapists are not free, but community is, right? Like living alongside other people who can admit that they're living in crisis, that we're all living in crisis, can unlock something really, really important, where we feel less alone, where we acknowledge just the sheer ugliness of what we live around, and that allows for the whimsy, that allows for me to kind of go, fuck it, there's a sort of you almost don't need to perform anymore. You know, like you're not at work anymore. It's like you're here. So, I mean, on the very first page of my book, I write about that because it's so important to me. It's that, you know, one of the other patients was like, "Hey man, like relax. You know, you're fucked. We're fucked. We're all here. We're all fucked." You know, and that's incredible. And I wish that was something we did more in the real world, because we are fucked, right? Like look at Gaza, look at the conditions in South Africa, and so I think an important part for me was also bringing that the lessons that I sort of picked up around sort of radical healing in a very short space of time, and you know, potentially posing that to the country and saying, hey, you know, maybe we should admit more often that we're all fucked.
Will you read for us, please?
Happily, sure. I was given very strict instructions about which parts to read, which I'm grateful for, because, like I said, there are 400. Should I just jump straight into it?
No, don't frame it. Just read it and then stop.
Okay, cool. All right. Like I said, very clear instructions. Cool. So we were going on an adventure again, but this time we didn't believe her. She also said that she would find a job quickly once we're back in Joburg and buy back everything we had lost. The three of us were disappointed to lose the first bit of furniture we had ever owned, but knew better than to argue with her. We also felt disappointed to be losing the best set of friendships we had cultivated since she took us from Diep Kloof on that cold night in 1997. After we moved into the Metro Hotel, Maya refused to get out of bed, covering herself with blankets and refusing to talk to us instead of looking for a job as she had promised. But I kept the faith, circling high-paying personal assistant jobs that I spotted in the workplace job supplement in the Star. For the younger people, the workplace was a jokes. And the Star was a newspaper. In the workplace job supplement in the Star with a red pen and showing it to her when she sat up to eat. I also stayed hopeful of finishing school the following year by studying through Damlin, I'm not sure, and held fast to the dream of becoming a filmmaker one day. The Metro Hotel was a fascinating place. I met an ever-changing group of people from all over the country and continent. I get why you wanted this. Most of them didn't stay for long. The Metro Hotel was just a halfway house, somewhere to stay the night on trips to buy goods to sell back home. But like us, there were fixed residents living there too. There was a cool short girl with a sharp sense of humor and a Pitori accent called Spongile. Spongile was a sex worker who let me in on her work, spending evenings performing nude acts on video calls with lonely Australian men for money. By let me in, I mean she told me about it. We spoke often in the afternoons while she fed, bathed, and clothed her infant child. When she asked me about school, I lied, claiming to be studying film, not returning the honesty she had gifted me. She lived downstairs from us with her own family of 3 who were often in the room, staying out of the frame while she performed sexual acts on the internet. Living immediately next door to our room was a very tall Zimbabwean dude called Reggie, but I only learned his name a month into our stay at the hotel. He was easily more than 2 meters tall, looked kind of zany, smoked weed nightly, and had some swag about him. The problem with Reggie was that he went out of his way to play hip-hop music as loud as he could whenever he came home from work late at night, which irritated the fuck out of me. Ma spent most of her mornings, afternoons, and evenings asleep or reading in our little rickety cardboard room, so I found Reggie's loud music to be a nuisance because every night I sat up dreaming of how she might wake up refreshed the next morning, ready to look for a job so we could find a decent place to live. But Reggie had dreams of his own. He came home after 11 p.m. every night from his hustle and made sure we knew how much he loved A-Card, Young Jeezy, Jay-Z, and Kanye West, while he winded down, disturbing the fragile hopes and dreams floating in our little room. I didn't mind his musical choices. especially Kanye West's College Dropout or Jay-Z's new music, which matched my mood and appetite for swagger and success, but not at the extent of Ma's fledgling vitality. Funky, meanwhile, began to grow quite distant from the family. Funky's my sister. Continuing the routine of isolation she had started in Nelspruit and still showing mild irritation toward Ma. She visited the internet cafe on her own every other night, and immediately after she and Funny came back from looking for places to sell art so we could have dinner, she would sink into the internet cafe once again and only come home late at night, saying very little to us. Even without the upper middle class black clientele they had built in Nelspruit, Fundu and Funky continued to make their art, spending their evenings working on abstract pieces that now boasted distinctly West African influences. We sell them to tourists for 100 rand each at the Bate Museum. Fundi informed me when I asked why. While they were away selling art, I spent mornings on my own hustle. On my own hustle, trying to wake Ma up for her job search, which was the hustle. And after failing each time to get her out of bed, I spent my afternoon sitting outside the Metro Hotel, thinking about whether or not I would ever finish school. She continued to assure me that I would do it via Damlin's matric correspondence program, so I held my breath and only let it out when I noticed a girl walking past the hotel every day around 2:30. She became my favorite part of the afternoons I spent sitting outside waiting for Fundi and Funky to come home with the day's meal. We began to make heated eye contact whenever she walked past, and the young man who worked in the restaurant area of the hotel, who also doubled as the plumber and tripled as the muscle who collected late rent payments, and a bouncer, Kutlwano, nearly wrestled me into going up to speak to her. "Don't be a bitch. She likes you. She's yours. Go say hi," he demanded excitedly. If I looked like you and spoke English like you, I would be in there tonight," he said with a look of longing. I promised Kutlwano that I would speak to the girl eventually and spent the next few days working up that courage. On one of those nights in that strange place, Kutlwano, Sibongile, her boyfriend, me, and other drifters who happened to be staying at the Metro Hotel at the time sat up and watched Barack Obama become president-elect of the United States. The hustle was real.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I think starting to get a sense of what I mean by how expansive this world is but just in terms of the emotional range. You shared yesterday something about how someone said to you, "I didn't know black men had emotions." Yeah. It reminded me of someone who said to me when I was closer in age to you that I didn't know black people love their children with the same intensity that we do.
Wow.
And so
true stories from South Africa.
So thank you for this incredibly expansive range of treatments. I mean, love. I started on love, but it's incredible how much it's a young person with the same preoccupations around desire that
Right.
that you have actually well into your 50s, sadly. But such a big world, right? So it's about taking yourself to a clinic, and that the world continues to be the world that you have continues to be so big. And I wanted that to read that particular one because it juxtaposes so it has the delicious layered humor that we find so much in this book. It has the large world, the US, different parts of Joburg, everywhere, adventure, and the contradictions of adventure, the joy and the difficulty, and the inventiveness of your siblings, and the difficulty of your mom and the job market. So thank you, Lesedi. I'm going to ask Foluso to read for us next.
Okay. So, again, like Lesedi, I've also been given strict instructions as to where to read from. So I'm reading from page 218 of The Parlor Wife. The familiar explosion of cold anxiety went off in Kandi's chest and into her head like fireworks. If Baba Tope found out the markets had been closed all day, he would ask her where she had been. She would have to think of a story to tell him before she got home. I better go to Madame Titi. She was expecting me about 10 minutes ago. See you both later, Kende said, putting the thought behind her as she continued to push her way to the front. She almost lost her footing a few times as her legs connected with other legs, her feet shuffling against shoes and sandals. When she finally made it to the front, she felt like she had been sent to the front line of a battlefield. There you are, Kende. It's very unlike you to be late. I hope all is well, Madame Titi said, her eyebrows furrowed. Yes, ma, I'm fine. I just got held up in the crowd, Kende said, not mentioning how she had spent almost half an hour making sure she timed her departure with Atinuke's laundry schedule. It's a big crowd, a fine turnout indeed. Governor Bodilon will have no choice but to listen to us. It will be impossible to get all of us to his on foot, though. Ben has organized a few buses with the help of the NNDP. Those will get us to Obalende, she said. At that moment, the crowd cheered as about 9 buses pulled up on the edge of the street. They were the brown public transport buses that Kende herself had been in many times in the past. She never imagined that she would ever think those buses weren't big enough. Some of us will have to walk, Iyadara said, echoing Kende's thoughts. Yes, I'll lead the rear of women who can't get on the buses. I've already sent word to Mr. Macaulay to see if we can get at least 2 more, Ben said. Come on then, we don't have time to waste, Madame Titi said, leading the way to the first bus. As they climbed on, the driver looked at them warily. The women settled down in the bus with a buzz of excitement in the air, like a team of mosquitoes. It felt like they were going on a school trip, united in their pursuit of justice, a formidable force against the colonial government. Many of them had already lost brothers, sons, and husbands in a war whose cause they could not explain, and they were determined that their income would not be under threat as well. A woman sitting in the middle of the bus in an orange Iro and Buba started singing in a loud, throaty voice. The lyrics of the song were easy, and as the bus moved, the other women joined in their medley of voices, with some beating the backs of the seats in front of them. We will not take it, no we shall not. Taxes for women.
Singing it.
Okay, I will sing it. We will not take it, no we shall not. Taxes for women, no we shall not. Lawrence said no, to Bodilon we go. We will not take it, no we shall not. Beside Kende, Madame Titi joined in the singing, the wind from the open windows making the hijab and scarf on her head billow out around her face, softening the sharpness of her cheekbones. Kende had never heard her sing, and her profile seemed almost youthful as it was softened by the movement.
Thank you so much, Foluso. And I think that, you were talking about how you wanted to write a novel about the lives of Nigerian women. And it's interesting that you write Kehinde, because writing is a solitary sport, right? Mm-hmm. And yet her process of becoming what she becomes, which you have to go find out, is you give her an army of different kinds of women, from Ama, who works alongside her and becomes her friend and is both her mirror and her opposite, and then Madame Titi, who's this kind of giant movement builder. And it's interesting that tension between the solitary becoming and this enabled, surrounded collective.
Yeah, there's so much that we take for granted today. There's so much that is normal to us that was built on resistance in the past that we know nothing about. And that idea of solidarity, that collectivism that comes with pushing against power to kind of get what you're pushing for is so important. It's like there's no job, there's no pursuits that you can do on your own. And I really wanted to show that. And this wasn't the first time in Nigeria's history that women had come together. There's the Aba Women's Riots in 1929. There was also the Aba Women's Riots or protests in 1946. And even more recently, NSARS, but many of you would have heard of the NSARS protests during COVID in 2020. So, that idea of collectivism and solidarity just shows the power of how much can get done when you do it together with other people.
Thank you. On that note of solidarity, and then you're going to ask questions. We did start a little late. I know exactly how many minutes late we started, and we will get our minutes back. Nathi, will you read the first bit? Remember, you read in two parts. So the
All right.
one before I interrupt you.
Whew, now I can read. Right. Return to Palestine. Malcolm had a special place in his heart for Palestine. He landed in Gaza on September 5th, 1964. He was welcomed by Mohammed Koulousi Faisal, a famous Palestinian judge and scholar. Malcolm prayed in the old mosque of Gaza, walked through the busy markets, and saw famous textiles and pottery. He was amazed by the orange groves and the apricot trees. He loved seeing it all.
Yes. Thank you. A beautiful Palestine, a vibrant Palestine with growth and movement and beauty and texture and just visually so incredible and just perfect for a coloring book. Of course, I'm sure some of that went into that. Will you read the next part for us and help us think about the contrast?
Sure. Visiting Khan Yunis. Gaza was also a place with a lot of pain. Many hundreds of thousands of Palestinians lived in Gaza as refugees after they were pushed out of their homes in other parts of Palestine when Israel became a country in 1948. This is known as Al-Nakba, or the catastrophe. Malcolm took time to visit Khan Yunis refugee camp, one of 8 camps that were built for Palestinians in Gaza. The camps were overflowing with people who had lost their homes. There were not enough schools, clean water, or medicines. It broke Malcolm's heart to hear stories of the families, but Malcolm was amazed by how strong the people remained.
Thank you so much, Nathi. I think the contrast speaks for itself. I'm now going to ask for a sign, and the mic will come down. Questions, as questions. There's one right next to you in the red and beige, and then is there another one? Okay, we'll start with you.
I think all of you are doing such important work. I know it's not a question exactly. And I feel like, Lesedi, I think the work that you're doing into allowing space for the mental health of males is important. I mean, it's like we've heard about the male loneliness epidemic, and I think what males often lack through patriarchy is spaces in which they can speak to each other about vulnerability and fragility. And I think that your book is doing important work to look at the internal spaces, because sometimes like maleness is so performative, you know, masculinity is so performative, and we don't realize that inside a 46-year-old man or 56-year-old man, there's still a little boy. And I think works like yours cater to the little boy inside every man.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. There's a question here.
Thank you.
I'm coming. There's 2 questions here in the black and then in the gray, like Lufefe and then the person sitting next to Lufefe. Oh, I thought you had your hand up. You didn't? Oh, okay.
Thank you to all the panelists. My question is, in your creative processes, in your thinking, how do you deal with the contradiction, especially when it comes to solidarity? So, I mean, we're living in times where the global South is meant to take this baton to fight for the dispossession, for the dispossessed, for the oppressed. And when you think about your works, and particularly also thinking about the World War II, Nigerian World War II, how do you then sort of process and internalize the contradictions that come from the global South? Sort of we talk about Khan Yunis, but then we also think about the myriad or the thousands of informal settlements that we have in South Africa, in Nigeria, in Brazil. So my question is around how do you deal with those contradictions? Do you look at it from a historical perspective, seeing like That's what we've inherited from the histories of dispossession and colonization. Just how does that feature in your thinking, if it does at all?
There's a question with, I can't see properly, I see white and beautiful big hoops.
Thank you to the panelists, incredible panel. Shout out to the moderator as well. You're killing it. But I have a question for Nathi and Lesedi. I wanted to ask you, Lesedi, having my bouts in mental health institutions, I don't like to call them a psych ward. But I think what I found from being institutionalized, and also shout out to taking yourself, sorry, ADHD. What I found with being institutionalized is exactly the point that you made, is that the most healing part is the community, but you often don't get to that realization up until you hit that rock bottom point. So I suppose I want to ask, how can we be more preemptive about building community, but also, do you think, like all the things that make us sick in the world that lead us to that point, do you think that like being institutionalized in that way is ever like a sustainable form? Because I often see people go in and out, and what I really find is the sort of more healing part is the community. How can we be preemptive in seeking that? And then I guess I just want to ask Nathi, how are you handling the online, or sort of like the backlash that's happening with the nature of the work that you're doing? Because there are very real economic consequences that we are seeing being inflicted on anyone in advocacy work speaking about Gaza. You are scared, even in South Africa, when we know our position, and I think everyone in this room can relate, you get the sense as though, what are the powers that be that are watching me advocate for this? So I just wanted to know, can you be honest about what the costs have been, so that we also know, as we go forth and conquer, what we're up against?
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna let you each answer for a minute, each.
Okay.
I mean, if I say a minute, you'll take 2 minutes. It's fine. If I say take 2 minutes, you'll take 5 minutes, and then we only have a certain amount
Yeah,
of time.
okay, I'll try to take a minute. I think there was one question for me. So this is the one about dealing with contradictions and how that affects the creative process. I do think about that a lot. I mean, even just as we're talking about Gaza, I was saying to my friend the other day that it's really hard to be, continuing to live and trying to thrive in a world where I know that there is a war going on and there are children every day who are losing their homes. And it really does affect my creative process personally. And I do have to make the conscious decision to, I have to push through, and I have to keep raising awareness about what's the issues in the world. So with the Power Wife specifically, Kehinde was dealing with a number of contradictions herself. She's in a polygamous marriage, but she's also fighting for women's rights. She's living in Nigeria, which is trying to be independent. There was so much rhetoric about independence around the time of the Second World War, which was kind of put to the side as the country kind of banded together with the rest of the empire to fight the common enemy that was Germany. So the country is trying to be independent, but at the same time, they're fighting with the rest of the empire to defeat the common enemy. So I do try and put these contradictions in my work, but also I try to make it positive as well. Like, what can I do? What can my characters do to make a change in the world? What can each of us do to make sure that history is not repeating itself?
Well, for me, really, first of all, I always think that, our struggles are all interconnected, especially when it comes to oppression. And, the knowledge of how powerful such a state as Israel is, I always also remember where we come from in South Africa, from an oppressive state in apartheid. And, how someone like Malcolm pointed these kind of hypocrisies out while he was still alive. And, I always think that such work is very important, and sometimes you just get broken by what you read about, what you see, what you hear. And there are days where you just, you question if this is real life. Are you stuck in the dream? And again, as a visual artist and a writer, I always just come back to reality and make sure that everything that we do is always backed by the fact that, there are kids that are dying every single day, starving every single day. And, I always try to just ground myself in a sense of like, this is what I am focusing on doing. And sometimes, you get distracted. Sometimes you get so depressed, but you then have to come back to reality of this is why you're doing what you should be doing.
100%. I think the first comment you made was around not wanting to call it a psych ward. We can call it whatever we want. We can call it the club. And in the club, we all fam. We can really call it whatever you want, but like such an amazing question around the sustainability of it. And I think you're right. People do keep going in and out, but I think people keep going in and out because we're treating the wrong thing. We're diagnosing the wrong thing. We're diagnosing individuals. And we're looking at the individual and whittling down to a single individual and not the conditions and not our culture and not what we think of as normal. So of course we're going to keep having to sort of escape this thing. I do have my challenges, I think sort of with psychiatry generally. I think sometimes, like sometimes we pathologize things that we shouldn't, like I'm not sure children, I do have some things I struggle with that I don't think we have the time for, but I think that's a great question, but there's also, this thing around like how sustainable it is and why people keep going in and out is A, because we're treating the wrong thing, and we're placing the onus on the individual, but also I think it highlights just the radical rebellion that's necessary, right? Like between the world and the self, and what you believe and trust more, and what you believe and what you care for more. I think a lot of us sort of try to preserve or try to kind of essentially preserve the world as it is by diminishing ourselves in order to sort of operate within it. But I think there's something really beautiful about, when your body just completely rejects that, and we should listen to that.
Lesedi,
Hello.
thank you very much. What is your favorite thing a year on about your book? Quickly.
Wow.
Quickly.
The award was nice.
Favorite.
Yeah. That was cool. But I think I just never know what anyone's gonna say in my DMs about the book. Oh. No, and I don't mean that in a. What I mean is like people will kind of tell me they just finished reading it and they couldn't not say something to me in that moment, and I find that really magical when people just kind of go, shit, man, you helped me see my mom in a UA. That means a lot to me.
Lesedi's book is Patient 12A. Please get it. He'll be signing immediately after this at the author's table. Nathi, you and I talk about your latest. It seems now we've started a pattern. It's round 2 of your new book on Gaza. What are we talking about next year? Quickly.
Well,
what's your book that we're going to talk about next year?
What we are going to talk about next year, quickly, is that until Palestine is free, none of us are free. So we're going to continue talking about Palestine until apartheid Israel is held to account, until we see Palestinian children grow, dream, and just be kids. So we're going to continue to see the fight.
Great. Nathi's brand new book is called Malcolm X in Gaza. He will be at the table signing. He's got other books as well, so get all of them, get him to sign, but certainly get his latest so that we can get this to be a bestseller too. Thank you very much, Nathi. I look forward to talking to you next year.
Looking forward to it.
Foluso's incredible life-altering debut is called The Parlor Wife. Trust me, this is what you need in your life. Get a copy, get her to sign, and tell us, what are you proudest of with this book quickly?
Oh, okay, very quickly. I think what I'm proudest of is the way people who have read it, my readers, have come up to me and said that Kendi's journey, although completely fictional, has really made them think about how to take charge and control of their own lives and how to find a way to be more empowered to live a fulfilling life. So that's very quick.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for your patience. I think we've taken back our time and a little bit more, like 2 more minutes. Please buy the books. They are definitely worth your time. Thank you so much, Foluso. Thank you so much, Nathi. Thank you so much, Lesedi. I've had a blast. I hope you have. Thank you. Oh my God, I had like 10 questions for each of you.